maybe we can start with an introduction. So maybe with Dharmendra, if you could just start off with a short introduction and also what your practice is all about, maybe, and so that we just understand, your perspective and background.
Dharmendra Prasad, and I practice in the rural context in India, especially in the northeastern region in Assam and also in Bihar. And my interest lies in ecology, agriculture, occupations, rural occupations, and material cultures and villages, horizons, winds, soil, so much things. Even I don't know like where my interest shifts throughout this. So it is also like very difficult and very interesting. And the reason that I'm in this room because I really like this whole idea of this, practicing like the way George conceived in relation with the UN Agenda 2030, and also like it talks about like basically the climate change and the peace and people, sustainability, so much things. So I'm like I'm in a very in early stage of my artistic career, one can say, and I think I will be able to learn a lot from George's experience and working in like whatever he's working in his own practice. Also, like I have looked at while coming here his own practices on the internet. So like yes, I'm hoping for the best.
Great.
All right. Very well.
I'll go next. My name is Srinivas, and I'm based in Goa. I'm a visual artist and filmmaker, but more, I would say, commercial work. Although I do enjoy discussing and also learning much more about the interdisciplinary nature of and the way we live. I think that's a really important aspect that one should kind of be looking at, especially in this kind of a world. And it's kind of hit home, like in this pandemic kind of situation, it makes all the more sense. So I'm really keen to understand how things are interconnected and how maybe we could live differently, perhaps. If that's a topic or discussion that we could maybe have. Yeah.
One question, are you now, you are also involved in the part of the organization committee?
Yeah. So I'm also part of the team of the Storia Foundation.
Yeah, that's important to know,
Yes,
yeah, okay, yeah.
That's
why
organizing this event.
All right, yeah, okay, very clear.
Yeah, as part of, I was an artist actually in the very first, the Story of Light. Had an installation that I had conceived along with another friend, Dilnaz. And then the Story of Space and the Story of Mind, I'm actually part of the team and part of the communications.
All right, very good to know.
Yeah, behind the scenes, yeah.
All right. So I will be next, I guess. Huh?
Yes, yeah.
Well, yes, my name is George Steinman, and I am an artist, musician, and researcher from Bern, Switzerland. Right now, I'm here in my studio in the city of Bern, and so my topic, which I gave, is like on the meta dimension, very much about the question of what is the responsibility and what also is the potential of an artist, of the arts in general. We sure will talk about this. As to my artistic background, yes, I've been working as a professional musician for many, many years. I'm educated as a painter and also studied Afro-American history in the United States. So I lived several years in San Francisco. And so in these years of all these artistic practices, I had many shows all around the world, mostly always connected to issues of ecology and to issues of cultural sustainability, and especially also to sort of like the point that art can really be a characteristic and an indicator of change. And this is a big topic we have to talk about, but this is the issues of all my works and installations. Today, it is so that, all my exhibitions this year were canceled, and all my projects, so among the one in Mumbai, which was entitled The Soul of Remedies, which I certainly will refer to, because the Soul of Remedies is sort of like an indicator for this incredible vulnerability this world is in. And then, of course, the issue is about like therapy or healing even, or at least of like traditions of like medicinal herbal plants and stuff like that. So, but also this project of course has been now brought into the virtual room, and this is true for my exhibitions in Washington, and the one in Hong Kong actually was scheduled in April, and so on and so on. And this is also certainly true for the concerts. All my concerts this year have been canceled, but we will get out of this. So anyway, so here I am, and I'm really at the point where I think it's fantastic that we are getting into dialogue worldwide, because this kind of fierce urgency of now that we are living in all these different multi-layered things, is most important that we get into dialogue to exchange our point of views and knowledge. Therefore also, and that's another characteristic in my work, I'm always very interested in transdisciplinary networking. So therefore I work a lot together with scientists from humanities, from the natural science, biologists, geologists, philosophers, but also with architects. But that's only one point. Most important, I think, it also has to go beyond the academic knowledge. So I'm referring not only to the knowledge which is on the high intellectual level taught at universities or high schools or something, but also the local knowledge, for instance, of people in villages, farmers, foresters, whoever. So I work a lot with people in different regions of this world, which are absolutely not intellectuals in the sort of like Western kind of thought, but have very huge knowledge about ecology, about holistic perception, and so on and so on. So this is sort of like the background of my work.
Maybe we can start with your topic of the room, and then maybe you could just expand on your views on art and the horizon.
Okay. All right.
Gender that you mentioned. So we can start off there and move on.
Yes, yeah. So let's set the pace. Yeah, this refers to the role of the visual arts, the arts in general, in connection with the UN Agenda 2030, which is sort of like our global plan, and to sort of like discuss and improve the situations which we have in all the ecological dimensions and so on and so on, is for me very, very important, because the humanities, including the arts, literature, music, but also philosophy, plays a very marginal role in all these key decisions which are taken from the politics especially, but also in connection with the, let's say, like the natural sciences, who provide us about data from climate change and so on and so on, So all my efforts since many, many years is based on this, to let these people know that we, the artists, the creative people, we have another vocabulary, but it's a most important vocabulary as well. It's not only about facts and figures, not about scientific data, but it's also about aesthetics. It's about emotions. It's about all these kind of levels, beauty and so on, which are as important. But now this is the point, and therefore, Dharmendra already have mentioned this, and that's why I attend all these climate conferences, for instance, or any scientific conferences, like yesterday, this conference from the University Bern, where I was also participating, which is exactly to the topic of what we're talking again today. It was called the ecological imperative. And, it's really the point that I think art has something to say. So talking about this is always now a topic in my projects, in my exhibitions, but also in my lectures or in my works with students, for instance, and so on. So this is the background. And we are familiar about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
The SDGs.
Yeah, SDGs, and they're all very important, each one. I mean, we can talk about water, we can talk about agriculture, we can talk about climate, we can talk about gender issues, and so on and so on. So you're all familiar, I think, with this 17 SDGs. And most important is to realize that in these UN papers, and then back to, let's say, like the papers which are made by the Swiss government or even by the state of Bern about the 70 sustainable goals, the word culture does not exist. That means, in fact, what we three do, or what we all do in the fields of the arts and the humanities does not exist, which is unbearable because, of course, we have to say very, very much about it, but we are not included in the debates, especially on the high segment panels, So therefore, I have this tragedy to include myself as an artist within these conferences. And now through the last years since the COP21 in Paris, which was very important, of course, for this Paris Agreement, and I included myself to give a voice to the artists. And especially, and that's very important, not in the form of just like hanging up some posters in the entrance hall, but really being part of the negotiations and include this voice of the artists, which is similar to my issue, and that's another point. It's similar to the knowledge of indigenous people all around the world, because the voice of the indigenous people who are not the cause for climate change, for instance, indigenous peoples are having no voice when it comes to the major decisions and panels, let's say in this UN climate conferences. They are not part of the big negotiations. Their voice is not really heard, although they are always present. They always try to make a statement. So I compare the arts as well to the knowledge of indigenous people's knowledge, which have exactly the same problem. Their voice is not being really taken serious. And also their suggestions and their advances, for, what could be improved, what is our problem in forests or in fishery or, in the Arctics and so on and so on. So there's sort of like an empathy and an empathical connection with this issue as well. So I try to give my voice on this, and this is especially the point, I think artists can very precisely look at the world, I mean, we can listen to it and, it's about perception. So we look at it and we look at it again and we look at it a third time, whatever, in forests and whatever, So art has a potential to open up these boundaries. I understand myself very strongly as a bridge builder between science and the arts, or a bridge builder between the politics and the humanities and so on. And that's also because I think, first, art is equal to other forms of knowledge. There's no hierarchy, Also in the academic concept, I don't believe, that the knowledge of, let's say, a biologist or an environmental engineer or whatever is more or less valuable than the knowledge of the arts. It's really about this bridge building to say we should get into the dialogue, in this transcultural and transdisciplinary dialogue to cross these forms of knowledge, because no one can tell me today in the 21st century that one species, one form of knowledge can solve the problems. It's impossible. We have to trust in the knowledge of other people, including, let's say, local knowledge, because only in dialogue and by exchanging these ideas, I think we are getting maybe, hopefully, to solutions. So, my issues is, I say art and culture matters. And even in conflict situations, like right now what we're in with the pandemics, but also with climate change and so on, art is not a luxury we should just have for entertainment on the weekend. It's something really which is essential for dignity, for your identity, for identity of a culture, and we really can be a part of it. So therefore, my inner structure now for today is more of like to say about this strange hermetic situation the arts all over the world. In my networks, you know, it's from Southern America to Asia, from Japan to Finland. You know, I mean, a lot of artists are concerned about exactly these questions, you know, because we feel sort of like put to the edge, although we would like to participate. So this is one of the points. The second point is really, you know, what is the value of culture within this sustainable development goals in all the different fields, which is, of course, as I see, absolutely topic of the day today and yesterday as well, you know, so fantastic, you know, the mind of culture, very, very interesting topics, you know. And the third, really, I would like to focus is the topic of hope. So instead of that, we just like say, okay, this and this is such a dramatic, bad situation. I would like to say there are some opportunities for hopefulness, for changing. And I would like to say then a few things about that. So much for it.
In your video short note that you had shared also, you had mentioned art is a characteristic and indicator of change. You had made I mean, and also as you mentioned, you know, indigenous people, you know, what we consider art as a separate, you know, subject or a separate category, for a lot of them is actually culture, tradition, you know, their daily lives. Literally, it's all actually that. It's not necessarily, you know, they don't necessarily consider it as, you know, art. So why do you think, you know, even at the highest levels, you know, art is not considered worthy maybe of being included as a culture, is not included, like you mentioned, it's not included as a term itself. So what is your view on why? I mean, because at the end of the day, it's the people who are kind of making these decisions are not doing it in a solo, what do you call it, environment. It is a big organization, especially the UN. So, I mean, what are your views and why it is so?
Well, this is, of course, a very complex question, but let me bring it to maybe like 2 points, more from like the philosophical point of view and one from the real practical, pragmatic point of view, you know. So starting with the pragmatic point of view, you know, I mean, we are all aware that our world is dominated by economics and by money. So it's always about economical issues in the first grade. It's consumption, how this globalized world of consumption is, you know, functioning, and what can be improved, you know, even by knowing about, you know, that this, let's say, cargo shipping is causing incredible problems for oceans. We know about all this kind of fossil energy mobility causing a lot of problems to climate change in there and so on. So basically, the issues discussed, for instance, in climate conferences is very much about political, economic issues concerning consumption, materialism, and so on, or it is based not quite good enough also on facts or figures given by science. And, you know, as a matter of fact, just to say this, scientists have told the politics for 30 years at least what is coming up in terms of climate change and as it comes to water and melting of the poles and what are the causes for you know, health for people and especially also for biodiversity, which is a topic I'm working very much on it, you know, and they have not been enough heard, not at all. You know, I mean, some of these issues, because they're very, very complex, well, of course they're present, but still politics, at least also here in Europe, are only beginning to really understand how dramatic the situation is, you know. Anyway, so just as a side information, you know. Now in this, you know, it is very clear. There's a hierarchy between what you need for living and what is materialism and so on. And then there comes the art, which is something beautiful and is something nice. I go for the concert on the weekend, and this is very subtle, and sometimes it's very complex and some kind of very, very sort of like strange stuff, you know, kind of contemporary art installations and so on. So this is not really necessarily, not really, you know, and therefore there is a hierarchy. And then there is this statement why that is a problem. And that's the philosophical issue from this question you have, Philosophical issue that we cannot only live on economic-minded issues, because we need also some subtle levels, let's say, like our soul, identity, health, cultural identity, culture practices. And this is the large scales of the arts. But we represent this value, and the issue is that we have to let this decision makers, the lobbyists and so on, to know that they should include artists in the debate, to just only maybe see a different perspective of decisions. And that's not taken place enough. So there's this big tension, therefore, I insist on it that it's important that we discuss, And culture, of course, also includes education.
Yeah.
No. And therefore, even more shocking for me that actually culture is not mentioned in the UN Agenda 2030 as a dominant major issue, because also it includes education. I'm certain that education, no matter on what level, education is a very, very important issue as it comes to knowledge of ecology, knowledge about interconnectedness of things, knowledge about respect, and so on.
The SDGs don't take into account the interdependencies between these goals or between these 17 things, I think, that they've mentioned as much as maybe they should be, I'm guessing. I mean, in the sense they all split into very specific criteria and categories. And
yes,
is doing their research and their practices in, aimed at specific goals. So I'm guessing that is something that maybe is a topic of discussion and debate that, that would be interesting to kind of talk about as well.
Yes, I think so. And the science, they start really to think very much about that, what is like transdisciplinary and interconnectedness, like in the molecular cell biology or whatever, in physics, quantum physics. And so they certainly realize, hey, this is so complex and okay, there might be different point of views, why shouldn't we listen to them? Why shouldn't we include them in a debate, so on and so on. So that's one of the points why I have a lot of discussion with scientists. Actually, yesterday in this conference, there were 52 participants and scientists from all fields, but I was the only artist.
Amazing. But that also just shows the
that's exactly what I mean. It shows this kind of strange hierarchy, I mean, I was sort of like a little bit shocked to realize that there are not more artists involved in this debate yesterday, anyways. So maybe Dharmendra, you have, is this sort of like making sense for you, what we are talking about?
You're on mute, Dharmendra.
We cannot hear you.
Hello? Yeah, hello?
Yeah, okay.
Me now?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So yeah, like it's absolutely like brilliant the way you talk and the way you like give the whole picture of your practice and interest and then struggles and problems. And I have like an inquiry that I'm living in a village, and the way the psyche of the community is like reshaped with the idea of technology, state policies for the development, and the dream for the luxury, the wish for the luxury. And like I'm here like sitting in a village trying to like work, trying to talk with the trees, with the insects, with the soil, and like trying to also have a conversation with the people, and like want to like tell that the reality is going to be something, and we should like we should like feel more connected with the whole ecological components. But they have, on the other hand, they're very like colonial idea of development and things like that. So in that kind of situation, I don't know like how to as an individual, as an artist, as a thinker, how to navigate, because there is a there is a state force. We live in the like quote unquote developing nation, developing country. So this whole idea of developing, then developed, like people have this kind of dreams in their life. They want car, they want they want luxury life. And on the other hand, like I'm here in place, like thinking something else, which is very important. Like, so how do you think, like as an artist, as a thinker, one should navigate in this kind of psychological landscape?
That's a very good question, really indeed. So first, just to make clear, are you from this village?
I cannot.
Did you?
George, your audio has gone down a bit. I think.
My audio?
Yeah, it's lowered a bit. I don't know why.
Oh.
It's lowered, yeah.
I don't know. What is the problem? Test 1 2 1 2 1. Oh.
We can hear you, but it's extremely soft.
Yeah.
Extremely low.
Yeah.
What? No idea. Let me.
You have to speak louder.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I don't
better.
know, but because
it's good now.
It's good. It's good. It's okay. It's fine.
Better, I have my microphone here, so actually
now it's good.
Work. It's
no,
better
now it's good. Yeah.
Okay. Also,
it's fine. It's fine, yeah.
I had first a question. Are you from this village? Did you grow up there?
Yes, I was born here. I grew up here.
So you know the people.
Yeah, I know everyone, and I know like how the village was when I was like kid. So the village was completely different. Like in the community, there was this sense of like, there was ecological sense. There was sense of like toil. So like with this 30 years of span, the community is losing its main character, which is toil.
Okay.
And I think like that's a big loss, because also different kind of knowledge system that are disappearing. So I'm from this village, yeah.
Okay, so no, that's important for me to know, because your question and the remarks, which I consider as being very important, how can we as artists communicate visual aesthetic things, and how can we communicate on the subtle level things which you say, you're watching this or that very on a subtle level, and people's of course busy by development questions, economical issues, and and so on, to improve their livings, of course, absolutely understandable. So let me tell you about my strategy, which I do, and just to open up a little remark, I worked a lot with people in very remote areas, for instance, 10 years in Russia, in the northern Urals with the local community. There it was about forestry and healing plants. And also in the Swiss Alps, I worked with farmers together, and so on and so on, Okay, anyways, the first point for me is always take these people serious, Don't have this kind of attitude that you're the guy from the city and you're very well educated because you have been in the art academy or whatever, So take these people serious and listen to what they say. So my experience in all these projects is taking these people serious. It will cross the bridges for a sort of like joining together in trust. And that's very, very important, especially if an artist coming from a big town and then he's going to the forest or the remote areas, and then he comes this kind of arrogant attitude to say, okay, yeah, I know what is the solutions, we have to do this or this and that, and then everything is improved and so on. No, not at all. So taking people serious, listening to them, and so the basics is respect. The basics is respect. Then by that, if you gain this by respect, by step, this is my experience, you can involve people even in your process. You can tell them about the value, why it is important to look very close to a plant, or the reason why you make a painting this or that, or do you work on a video and that's the issue of it, So they start to get familiarized with a vocabulary, which is of course very strange for them in the very beginning. And I give you an example from a work I did in the poorest village from the Swiss Alps, which was actually a committed work for the University of Bern, but I transferred the entire money to the poorest village, and then I built first a bridge, a wooden bridge 20 meters long, and then also next to it a cabin which is open for the villagers. But first of all, I asked them, would you have this? Would you participate in the development process? And if yes, then you're part of this entire growing sculptural process. And they agreed with it. And until very now, this cabin in this bridge, it's now, it's 12 years old, is in absolute perfect shape. And why? Because the local community is cleaning it, they are taking care of it, and that's only because they took it in their heart. So that's my belief. So my experience is do it with respect, let them know. And I'm sure, you know, people are sensitive enough to see. So a second point which you mentioned is very omnipresent all over the place as well, which is, you know, of course, they have other concerns. Their priority is job and survival and you know, whatever and so. And this is, of course, something one has to take serious. But still, you know, it is important to let them know that their history, their local knowledge from the past, from the generations before, is also something valuable. That's what you mentioned a little bit, you know, that this gets lost. This is certainly not only true in India, it is true all over the world, you know. So these questions of identity, that you know, you belong to this culture, this is my village, and we had these traditions, this local knowledge is of course getting lost more and more and more. If you are looking only to this global perspective, because, you know, these guys in Europe, they have everything and we don't have not so much, and we would like to do, and this idea of competition and so on and so on. So this is sad. So sometimes it's very important to let them know that all your traditional knowledge is very much valuable. Don't totally give it up. Trust in it, which doesn't mean that you need internet and you can do whatever technology and you can have a nice a car or whatever, but have respect to the traditions from your families or from your village in the background. This is what I keep telling the people all the time. So that's one of the issues where you asked what to do. I give you another point. I have sort of like, that's a talk under the artists. Also sort of like a subversive kind of strategy. You know, because if you're attending a high segment panel from ministers at the climate conference in Bonn with your badge from the UN, they don't know who you are. You know, all these ministers or whoever from the governments or panelists, whatever, or maybe from lobbyists, from major companies from the world, you know, for fossil energy or what, they don't know that you're an artist. They think, okay, he might be from an NGO or he's maybe from a government or he's something like that, you know, and that gives us an incredible free space to perceive how situations are. So that's the way I do it. When I get into these conferences, I'm just there as an observer. And this is especially about sort of like observing the aesthetics, the behavior, the social structures, the hierarchies or so. And of course, I make my notes. And out of that, there are hundreds and hundreds of mind maps made, drawings, sketches, which I make mostly exactly during the conference, all these talks and points and stuff like that, you know. So getting involved and only telling the people who you are if they ask you to do so. But don't tell them I'm here as an artist and I'm very, very critical as to your issues from the fossil energy or something like that. And only if they ask you. And of course, then you are totally transparent. And then I tell them, no, I'm an artist and I have a different approach and I'm looking here. But you see from my badge, I have an official mandate from the Swiss government or I have a mandate from the UN or whatever to get in. And for me, it works because it gives me new knowledge. I see how this structures functions, and through that, an artist can then make his own interpretation, and of course, then different insights, and that results then in your work, no matter where that is.
One question and one this thing about art as an indicator of change and the thing is, through your practice, have you actually experienced that? I mean, like you mentioned, the bridge and the small.
Yeah.
Are there any other such instances where you've actually managed to create this change, or at least the beginnings, or be a catalyst for this? I mean, maybe you could just.
Yes, absolutely. There are
that
several
would be really
of them.
Interesting. Yeah.
Several of them. But I give you an example.
Sure.
I was the first Western artist to be invited to the city of Tallinn in Estonia. That's in the Baltic states, close to Scandinavia, So Tallinn, beautiful town. They have a fantastic museum for contemporary art, which was built in 1932. So I was, after they separated again from the Soviet Union, I was the first Western artist to be asked for a solo exhibition in this wonderful museum. So as always, I went to this place to look at it for making decisions and looking at it, And when I came to Tallinn, met with the director, I observed that this house was in real bad shape. I mean, the infrastructure was weak, as it comes to the sanitary infrastructure, the light conditions, some windows were broke because they had no money. And during the Soviet Union time also, there was not enough technology around, for all to do that, Yeah. So to make it short, within 24 hours, I decided my exhibition would be the entire renovation of the museum inside and outside with state-of-the-art material in ecological terms. I mean, this is from paint, facade, windows, light, infrastructure for the toilets, whatever, floors, you name it. The entire, you can see it on my website, the entire renovation of a museum. And then it was just shown empty, void. So with the whole ritual of the arts, which is invitation card and posters and publications and opening ceremonies and stuff like that. But it was empty. And then we organized it as a foundation, and it was given to the Artist Society from Estonia with one point. This building can never be used for anything else but for art and culture. And not for commercial businesses or whatever, the American Business Center or, whatever, headquarters from BWM in the Baltic states or whatever, something like that. So, and until now, this place has incredible resonance. It's a contemporary museum for contemporary art, but it's based on the idea, which everybody said in the beginning, George, it sounds good, but it's crazy. You cannot raise the money for this total renovation. And it's a nice vision, but it doesn't function, but it does. And that, of course, has created incredible resonance, until today. This is an international museum. Now you can see their websites. They have a great contemporary art project, but it's based on this, that an artist said, no, I don't make an exhibition and I show my works, and then after 6 weeks, it will be transported by Pro Helvetia back again to Switzerland and so on. So it was based on the entire renovation of the building with state-of-the-art material, which came from Switzerland. So I was a negotiator. I was an undertaker. I got in contact not only with all the companies delivering whatever material, lightnings or toilets or whatever, but besides of that, also I was a bridge builder between arts and let's say the community of Estonia. So this is one example, and it worked out very, very well, and it works until the very day. So that's a very radical question, of course, also to make a museum exhibition with an entirely empty, because the renovated floor and the new painted walls and the new lighting systems and the new toilets were sort of like a sculpture. So that's one of the examples.
Amazing. I think, something that can really work, art, I'm saying, that can work not just for a very short duration, but something that can be a part of the community and that can resonate, for many years to come, is, I think, something that is really important. And
Yeah.
then also in this whole topic of art and it being included within, like, say, the UN agenda, something like this is what is, I guess, required, and not necessarily art shows that are, maybe just publicity and don't really speak or educate or do any of those things for the greater good, perhaps, of this uh,
Yeah, and yeah, of course, this is radical because the usual image of an artist is making paintings. He makes a mural. He makes a sculpture. He is a composer and he makes music. Now, this is totally transferred to a different kind of attitude. And actually, there is one sentence in the basic papers from Mind of Nature, which was probably also the point why I agreed to even participate in the beginning. There's this one sentence which is from ego mind to eco mind. And that's the point, you see. That's a total different attitude also in the arts. I like this sentence very, very much because it is transforming this attitude from an artist and from his possibilities. So therefore, I'm totally, absolutely believing very strongly that art has a lot to offer. But of course, you have to question your own paradigms and your own structures just as well. It's not anymore about having as much as possible paintings shown in a gallery and so on. It does not include it, but exclude it. But the different approach in this kind is based on this holistic understanding of responsibility. So this ecological mind, the awareness about it, that now we are in a time of dramatic change. We are living in a very vulnerable world. And we as sensitive human beings, as creative human beings, we see it, we feel it, and we can do something. And this is not important that it's such a big thing like in the entire renovation of a museum. It can be, and I'm talking to Dharmendra now, it can be also something very small in your village, which gives you a very good feeling, and the people gives a good feeling and something like that, So it doesn't have to be such a major thing like a museum, but anyways,
Okay.
Yeah.
So we almost, we have...
Oh, okay.
40
That
minutes
was fast.
Quickly. Yeah, exactly. It's such an interesting topic, and your experiences obviously are quite vast and amazing to listen to. So I have a few questions that that we've got that I'd like to kind of put it across to you. And
Yes.
to them in brief, that would be great.
So we would enter now the second part, actually.
The second part, yeah. But
all right. Okay. Good.
So the first one is in a world where we struggle to find sustainability in every aspect, what is your perspective on the sustainability of making art objects and art fairs, for the market? I mean, is that something that you can just talk about a little bit?
Yes, this is a very important and very topic question. Thank you for whoever made this question. There are many layers as it comes to the sustainable dimension of the arts. Again, if you're talking about like the method dimension, which is like your attitude, how to do that, that's what we just were discussing. This work in Estonia, which I just mentioned, was actually considered by the World Bank as being the one sustainable sculpture. And what does that mean? It is something which is based on a different time culture, because it has something to do which creates improvement, or something which has to do with long-lasting kind of things, a time culture which is different, and you have to trust in this, because we're living in a very, very busy time, and everything has to be fast and better today than tomorrow, and so on, So trusting in this kind of development, this is something which has to do with sustainability, very much so, time. And then, of course, as it comes to material, this is a big conflict in the business of the art world as well, also in the theaters, because still there are so many toxic materials used, and then you have a recycling problem. You have an exhibition and you use this or canned stuff, and then, oh, hell, what I'm doing with this after the show, so it's kind of So my point is to think about what kind of materials you use, to be aware about the sustainable effect it will have. And it starts from gaining it. Let's talk about, let's say, like fossil coal, or you're talking about whatever metals gained maybe by child works somewhere in a mine in wherever, and something. You have to be aware if you work with this or another kind of material, and thinking to the very end, which means think about how you're recycling your art after you did it. And that's one of the decisions. Since more than almost 25 years, I don't use any petrochemical products in my work at all. That's why, referring to the herbs and to plants like lichens or stuff, I produce all my materials by myself. And that starts again by collecting it, talking to people who have knowledge about that, let's say like berries or something, then preparing that in my studio. You see in the background, all this stuff, what you see here is only natural materials, no chemical issues, no oil paints, nothing like that. So it's about material as well. And then, of course, and this is a tricky question, this is maybe not quite what the gallerists and the art market is asking you for, you have to stand tall and resist if you believe this is your right way. One of the questions coming up to me is always, George, using blueberry sap on your works, I mean, can you still see something after 10 years, or something like that? And yes, of course you do, but it's part of it that something is sort of like in a dynamic process changing. So, of course, this is an argument with the collectors, because they would like to have an investment which is lasting for the next 500 years.
It comes back to economics and
then
money.
That's exactly. And then that's the economic point of view. And I would just not to moralize it, but I would like to say, let's be sensitive about these issues, because if you're talking about sustainability issues, we're talking about Agenda 2030, the SDG goals, about our responsibility for the future generations, then we have as artists to be just as sensitive about using materials as what we asking the energy industry, or what we're asking the car industry, or whatever pharma industry or something like that, because we always point on them. So I think, we have to also be critical to our own methods.
In connection with that, what are your thoughts on the traditional in the technological era? For example, herbal medicine, or even the indigenous cultures and their perspectives on
This is a very important question as well, because I think this is important. So as I just mentioned, since more than almost 25 years, I work with this natural materials, collecting stones, making pigments, transforming them into whatever herbal plants and so on. That refers to my sort of like sadness in a way also about this incredible vulnerable time that we are living in, and we are observing daily by day, if you're talking about climate, we're talking about air pollution, about water, about agriculture, pesticides, and so on, all these incredible dimensions. So I really think we should trust also in knowledge, which people had for hundreds and hundreds of years, sometimes, And of course, indigenous people know very much about that. So I worked with several shamans together in the northern Ural, and also in Finland, in the Sami country. And it's northern on the top of Finland, and they have an incredible knowledge. And we should take this knowledge about herbal plants and about therapies and healings and whatever, even like coloring wool or something. I'm very much interested in that, because this is sort of like an indicator for this sort of like ecological, holistic understanding of how we can work, So to make it short, I think it's very, very wise to check out what these people and these traditions knew about herbal plants and so on. And so that's why my project, actually based from Mumbai, was called The Soul of Remedies, which is, of course, referring to the subtle dimensions of, let's say, like pharmacy or medicinal knowledge. And of course, in India, you have a very, very long tradition in all this, you know. So the idea was, in fact, to work together with one of the world leading homeopathic doctors, which is based in Mumbai. Rayan Shankaran is his name. So, and he published a lot of books about the homeopathic values. And so that's just one of the points. Yeah, check this out and try to figure out that there are different options to that. But this is not very loud. It is on the very subtle dimensions, you know. So, but artists have this knowledge.
Amazing. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, at least in this particular room.
Okay.
Indra, thank you so much for being a part of this. I hope George's experiences and his conversation enlightened you in some way, and it helps you forge way forward in your village and perhaps in your practice.
Ciao. All right. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.